Next on Currents News.
People of color have not always received the acceptance and honor that our human dignity and cultural contributions to this nation of ours has deserved.
America's first Black Cardinal Wilton Gregory, the Archbishop of Washington, D.C., celebrated a Black History Month Mass in the Diocese of Brooklyn. Also, the world watches and waits for what's next in Ukraine. Russian soldiers are inside the country, and the U.S. is now calling it an invasion. Pope Francis appoints a priest with ties to the Brooklyn Diocese to be the next Bishop of Charleston. Plus, they are one step closer to sainthood. A Catholic couple assassinated at the start of the Rwanda genocide in 1994 could soon be beatified. I'm Jessica Easthope. Currents News starts right now. Black Catholics felt seen and heard this weekend in the Diocese of Brooklyn with a proud display of history and culture. And the nation's first Black cardinal was there to witness it. Cardinal Wilton Gregory celebrated a special mass in the Diocese of Brooklyn on Sunday. The diocese has the largest population of Black Catholics in the country. During his homily, he delivered a message of hope and empowerment, reminding Black Catholics they are a gift. Spirits were lifted at Immaculate Conception Monastery Church in Jamaica Estates on Sunday. The church was packed as Bishop Robert Brennan and the Diocese of Brooklyn welcomed Cardinal Wilton Gregory, the main celebrant of the Mass of Thanksgiving for Black History Month.
When the church needed a voice of authenticity, of honor, and of self-reflection, you were there to lead all of us. And so we will be always, always grateful. Thank you. God bless you.
Cardinal Gregory's message to the Black Catholics in attendance: be proud.
We are a gift to this country.
The Thea Bowman Mass Choir, with many members dressed in traditional African garb, served as the score for the Mass. Cardinal Gregory used his homily to not only empower Black Catholics, but promote unity within the church.
It is also a time for nation building and for strengthening the bonds that tie us together as one people.
Cardinal Gregory, who's achieved several milestones as the first, including the first Black president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, has always been outspoken about the evils of racism. And Sunday was no different.
People of color have not always received the acceptance and honor that our human dignity and cultural contributions to this nation of ours has deserved.
According to the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, the Diocese of Brooklyn is home to nearly 215,000 Black Catholics. If you haven't been to a Diocese of Brooklyn Black History Month Mass, you still have time. Last year, the parish of St. Michael's, St. Malachy in East New York held its own celebration, and this year it's coming back. It's this Sunday and includes a Mass, student presentations on Black Catholic saints, guest speakers, and so much more. Mass begins at 9 a.m. The church is located at 225 Jerome Street in Brooklyn. Then celebrations and presentations will continue at Salve Regina Catholic Academy, located at 237 Jerome Street. Mayor Eric Adams' subway crackdown went into effect Monday. Teams of NYPD officers and outreach workers are currently canvassing trains and subway stations across the city, seeking to identify the mentally ill and homeless to stop them from living there. The teams will then help them get treatment. The top priority stations include Penn Station, Grand Central Terminal, the Fulton Street Corridor, and Jamaica Center. The patrols will happen between 2 p.m. and 10 p.m. This as New York City had an especially violent weekend underground. At least 8 incidents took place in city subways, with only one involving an attacker who appeared to be homeless. The incidents happened in every borough on 4 different train lines and in 4 different stations. None of the attacks were fatal, though some victims were hospitalized. New info out by the MTA says a big chunk of Big Apple bus riders aren't paying their fare. Nearly 30% of riders aren't giving their $2.75, costing the MTA $56 million in the last 3 months of 2021 alone. This is the highest bus fare evasion numbers have been in at least a decade. Subway fare evasion is below 8% for that same period. New police data is showing serious crime around the city has gone up nearly 14%. Among the top crimes seeing an increase, there have been 300 more serious assaults this year compared to 2020. Burglaries are almost up 7%, and shootings have surged since the start of the pandemic, climbing to nearly 60%. Funeral plans are set for fallen firefighter Jesse Gerhard. The 33-year-old died a day after responding to a 2-alarm fire in Queens. Tonight, February 22nd, Gerhard's wake will run until 9 p.m. at the Frederick J. Chappie and Sons Funeral Home in Islip. His funeral will be on Wednesday, February 23rd at 1:30 p.m. at St. Patrick's Church in Bayshore. Be sure to stick to Currents News for coverage of that funeral service. Now to the Ukraine, where the winds of war are rapidly increasing. Following weeks of troop buildup along the Russia-Ukraine border, Russian soldiers are inside Ukraine, and the U.S. and Great Britain are now calling it an invasion. President Vladimir Putin ordered his troops into 2 Moscow-backed separatist regions, despite warnings from the West. And Europe is now bracing for an armed conflict feared to become the largest since World War II. And the U.S. and other Western powers are now lining up crippling sanctions on Russia. President Biden outlined what he's planning.
These have been closely coordinated with our allies and partners, and will continue to escalate sanctions if Russia escalates. We're implementing full blocking sanctions on 2 large Russian financial institutions, VEB and their military bank. We're implementing comprehensive sanctions on Russian sovereign debt. That means we've cut off Russia's government from Western financing. It can no longer raise money from the West and cannot trade in its new debt on our markets or European markets either.
The president says he will also impose sanctions on Russian elites and their families. All across the Ukraine, Catholics are turning to their faith and praying for peace. Alex Marquardt reports from eastern Ukraine, which has already seen its share of fighting over the years.
The old Crimea cemetery stretches across the rolling hills outside Mariupol in eastern Ukraine. In section 21, the Ukrainian flags whipping in the wind mark the graves of Ukrainian troops, mostly young men who have died fighting Russia-backed forces in the past 8 years, an often ignored conflict that has killed as many as 14,000 people, including more than 3,000 civilians. Ruslan Pustovoit was a soldier. Now he fights with a right-wing nationalist group called Right Sector.
Putin is a pathetic small man. Everyone is ready to tear Russians with their own hands.
He says he knows around 200 people who have been killed. He shows us the grave of one of them, a fallen friend now etched in stone, as well as his memory.
Too many comrades have died, too many civilians, too many children.
In the bitterly cold, driving rain, Roman Peretyatko, a priest, prays at the towering grave of his friend, one of the first from here to die in the fighting. But Peretyatko, quiet and understated, has 2 sides, dividing his duties as an army chaplain in his olive green frock, which he says is his calling, and tending to a civilian congregation in this small Mariupol chapel.
We're losing our best people. The church gives people comfort. If they ask what's going to happen next, we say it's God's will. We prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
People who can't go to church ask Peretyatko to pray for them. He says their names at the altar. Among the handful who came this morning is this man who had one thing on his mind. Mir, peace.
We pray for peace above all. Thank God it's peaceful right now. We're taking it one day at a time. We'll see what happens next.
The people of Ukraine have shown extraordinary calm in the face of this Russian threat, but it is clearly taking a toll.
They tell us to remain calm. We would love to live peacefully, to go to work, to raise children and grandchildren. We're worried. How could we not be?
That was Alex Marquardt reporting. Some military observers believe Putin will use Russian troops to connect Russia with Crimea, which he seized in a 2014 invasion. Russia is now recognizing those two breakaway regions of Ukraine as independent, and Putin did order so-called peacekeeping troops to enter the region in eastern Ukraine. The area is known as Donbass, and President Putin signed decrees Monday defying warnings that such a step would be illegal and kill off peace negotiations. Now, in response, the Kremlin says it hopes the move will help restore calm and let the world know that Moscow remains open to diplomacy with the United States and Europe. The UN Security Council held a rare and extraordinary session Monday night to condemn Russia. Ambassadors from Western countries slammed Putin's aggression, calling his actions a break with international law and an attack against the territorial integrity of every UN member state. But Moscow pushed back, blaming the U.S. and the West for, quote, cramming weapons into Ukraine. The Ukrainian ambassador spoke, calling Russia a virus for instigating war, and then declared that we are not afraid of anything or anyone. We owe nothing to anyone, and we will not give anything away. The president of the Polish bishops is calling on Catholics and people of goodwill in Poland to welcome Ukrainian refugees seeking shelter in the country. Archbishop Stanislaw Gadecki says everyone has the right to live in peace and security, and everyone has the right to seek safe living conditions for themselves and their loved ones. And later in the newscast, we'll meet Father Thomas ONeil, a pastor from Rhode Island who has been making a pilgrimage to churches in the Diocese of Providence, praying for peace in Ukraine. His story and much more coming up in this newscast. A verdict has been reached. A federal jury in Georgia has found 3 men who killed Ahmaud Arbery guilty of hate crime charges, backing the prosecution's argument that pent-up racial anger motivated the men to chase down and shoot Arbery back in 2020. Chris Wynn has the latest details.
Justice for Ahmaud Arbery! Justice for Ahmaud Arbery!
On the eve of the 2nd anniversary of Ahmaud Arbery's death, the 3 white men who killed him were found guilty on all counts in a federal hate crimes trial.
I, as a mom, will never heal.
Tuesday, Travis McMichael, Gregory McMichael, and William Roddy Bryan were convicted of interference of rights, a federal hate crime, and attempted kidnapping. The McMichaels were also found guilty of an additional firearms charge for using and carrying a firearm during a crime of violence.
They gave us a sense of a small victory, but we as a family will never get victory because Ahmaud is gone forever.
The jury found that the men attempted to chase Arbery and attempted to unlawfully confine him using their trucks as he jogged through their neighborhood outside Brunswick, Georgia in February 2020. Arbery's mother relieved with the verdicts after the judge rejected an earlier plea deal agreed to by prosecutors.
They didn't have a son that was lying in a cold grave.
Come on. All right, come on.
And they still didn't hear my cry.
All 3 men could now receive sentences of up to life in prison and heavy fines for the federal convictions. They're currently serving life sentences after being previously convicted of murdering Arbery in a separate state trial, although they have said they plan to appeal.
No one should fear that if they go out for a run, they will be targeted and killed because of the color of their skin.
Chris Wynn, Currents News.
The Supreme Court has agreed to hear a new case involving religious rights. The clash involves a Colorado web designer who says her Christian beliefs prevent her from offering wedding website designs to gay couples. She is being prevented from doing so by a state anti-discrimination law, but the designer argues the law violates her free speech and religious rights. The case is expected to be argued in the fall. Pope Francis has officially accepted the Bishop of Charleston, South Carolina's resignation, and his successor has ties to the Diocese of Brooklyn. Father Jacques Fabre is set to become the next shepherd of Charleston. He was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and immigrated to New York while he was still in high school. It wasn't until 1986 that he joined the priesthood. He was ordained in the Diocese of Brooklyn. He currently serves as the local superior of Scalabrinian priests in Atlanta. There's a lot more news headed your way, showing solidarity for the people of Ukraine. One Rhode Island pastor hops in the saddle as he makes a pilgrimage of prayer. And a Catholic couple killed at the start of the Rwandan genocide, now on the road to sainthood. A look at their checkered past. Plus, a historic meeting between Pope Francis and university students, how the church is tackling the world's biggest challenges head on.
There are now some big changes to the tablet website. You can get personalized access to the Catholic news you value. Sign up for free at thetablet.org.
We've been reporting on world reaction to the escalating crisis in Ukraine. As tensions unfolded in recent weeks, Father Thomas ONeil of the Diocese of Providence took a rather unique approach to easing them, a bicycle pilgrimage of prayer. Father Tom joins us now. Father, with the eyes of the world fixated on Russia's aggression in Ukraine, you did more than just watch, you took action. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
I sat and thought about it, and I said, all I can do is pray. The decisions that are made are out of my hands and out of a lot of other people's hands. So I said, one of the prayers that we can do is pilgrimage. It uses up our energy, which is a good thing. And it's a way of, you might say, praying with our whole bodies. I got on my bicycle in my hometown and started visiting the churches along the way, and just saying a few prayers at each place, just praying for the well-being of the people in the Ukraine.
Riding your bike for so many miles, what was your motivation?
My motivation was a sense of powerlessness, that it's in God's hands as far as I could see it. I felt powerless about what I could do to prevent misery, horror, death, bloodshed, and the other horrible things that go with war. When I was in Canada, I did know a few Ukrainian people, not a huge number of them, and it isn't that they said a great deal about the Ukraine, but as I read a little bit about how Russia treated the Ukraine and how starvation took place, especially in the 30s, the food was taken from the Ukraine to Russia, and the people in the Ukraine starved, and the Bolsheviks did not care. And some people suggest that it might have been deliberate. So I just wanted to pray that their democracy and that their sovereignty as a nation can continue and that they can live in peace.
And Father, lastly, what are you hoping other Catholics can do? Are you hoping that this starts a little bit of a movement?
I'm sure that many people are already praying in a variety of different ways for the sake of the Ukraine. And if some of them choose to either walk or get on a bicycle or whatever they may do, I'm hope that they too can stop and make a journey in various places along the way to pray.
Father Thomas ONeil of the Diocese of Providence, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm happy to have the opportunity.
The Ukraine branch of the Catholic charitable organization Caritas is preparing for a possible humanitarian crisis. According to one of the organization's directors, the war would be a big tragedy, noting that potentially millions would find themselves in need. Caritas says they would need to step up efforts they've already been taking in conflict areas since the 2014 unrest, including organizing shelter and providing food and medical support. If you would like to help Caritas in their efforts, you can send donations to their website, Caritas.org. You can find their appeal for Ukraine right on their homepage. Coming up this Thursday, Pope Francis will open up dialogue with Catholic University students in North, South, and Central America. It's all part of the ongoing consultation process for the Synod of Bishops. And during the event, His Holiness is expected to discuss issues surrounding education, migration, and the environment. And participating students will present projects to the Pope showing how they aim to transform the environmental and economic realities related to human migration. They're one step closer to sainthood. A Catholic couple assassinated at the start of the Rwandan genocide in 1994 could soon be beatified. As Claudia Torres reports, the Rugambas have been described as a light in total darkness for their efforts to promote unity at a time when it was not acceptable.
For almost 20 years of marriage, Cyprian and Daphros's relationship was on the verge of collapse. He was an artist, poet, and scholar of Rwandan culture who had great success in the 1960s and 1970s. But he was unfaithful to his wife with several other women, and he even had a child with one of them. On one occasion, he even disowned Daphros and threw her out of the house because he believed the rumors spread by their neighbors that said she was a witch.
He told her to pack her bags, and without further explanation, he returned her to her family. And this was something very hurtful at that time, a very serious offense. Then, little by little, he understood that these accusations were false and that they made no sense, and he went back to his wife.
Daphrose was a practicing Catholic with extreme patience. She never left her husband despite how much he made her suffer.
Daphrose always stood by her husband in silence and suffering. She was a woman of deep faith. In fact, she welcomed the daughter Cyprian had had with another woman as her own.
Everything changed when Cyprian suffered from a serious and mysterious illness, which doctors couldn't diagnose. The year was 1982 when the unexpected happened.
It happened during a trip to Belgium, where he went for medical tests. During the flight, he had a very strong faith experience. He was reading the text of a song he composed when he understood the role of God in his life. When he arrived in Belgium, all the symptoms he was suffering from disappeared.
Cyprian converted to Christianity and made a radical change in his relationship with his wife. In the late 1980s, they both joined the missionary-focused Emmanuel community. Cyprian began to promote unity among different ethnic groups in Rwanda, at a time when such an idea was not acceptable.
He didn't have a political party or political leanings. He said he belonged to the party of love, to the party of Christ. And for this reason, Cyprian did not join any of the political currents in his country, and this had serious consequences in his life. He lost his prestigious position as director of the Research Institute of Local Culture.
He lost his job and then his life during the genocide of 1994. On April 7th, gunmen entered the garden of his house and shot him with Daphrose and 6 of their children. They were not killed for belonging to a tribe, but for being Christians and promoting fraternity. The soldiers put an end to the lives of Cyprian and Daphrose, and with them to an intense story of love, forgiveness, and faith.
That was Claudia Torres reporting. The cause for the Rugamba's canonization was first opened back in 2015. If canonized, the couple will become the first Rwandans to be declared saints. Still to come on Currents News. We'll take you inside Italy's newest church, which is one of the most unique places of worship in the country. And a 90-year-old devout Catholic and woodworker who is single-handedly taking on the growing problem of homelessness in his community. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Italy is known around the world for its breathtaking churches, and now it can celebrate one of the most unique places of worship in the country. The inauguration of the Church of St. James the Apostle in the town of Ferrara was 10 years in the making. That's how long it took architects to design and construct the extraordinary church. The interior is marked by its simplicity. Wood and concrete are blended in an imposing interior filled with natural light.
At the same time, with very primitive materials, because this idea of giving oneself to the earth and having something very essential is very important.
The team of architects decided to highlight that principle in the altar, which is made of a rough stone symbolizing the rock upon which Jesus founded the church. And finally, a 90-year-old man in Oregon who has a knack for inventing things. His latest project, a mobile shelter for the homeless. Meet Vern Stewie, a devout Catholic who has witnessed his hometown filling up with tents and tarps for people without homes. And after sharing a few conversations with people living in makeshift shelters, he decided to create Grandpaverns Homeless Shelter, a home on wheels that Vern is hoping will change the lives of those less fortunate. And that is Currents News. I'm Jessica Easthope. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.